We are very privileged to have guests with us here today from CSX Corporation, and I want to introduce to you Mr. David Baggs. David is Vice President of Capital Markets and Investor Relations at CSX. He's been there for a long time and has nearly 30 years experience with them. In his role, he directs every aspect of the company's capital structure, interactions with all of the shareholders, the bondholders, the rating agencies, the investment and community banks, the community, the entire banking community, and has led the organization successfully in many different areas, including mergers and acquisitions and the finance area, a lot of strategic development, has recruited and developed a lot of talent there. We are delighted that he is a supporter of Mason, William, and Mary, and we are very privileged to have him here. So he's going to talk with you today about his role as vice president there, about being in the business of corporate finance, and give us a lot of information that'll be very insightful, I'm certain. So it's my privilege to introduce you, Mr. David Baggs.
Well, hello, and good afternoon, everyone. And Shaquita, thank you for your kind introduction. It is great to be back here at Mason and to have an opportunity to talk with all of you about career potential opportunities at CSX Corporation. Joining me here today are two of my colleagues, Sean Pelkey, who is a director in operations finance, and also Liz Burrows, who is also an analyst in that same operations finance role. That sounds like an interesting title, operations finance, and we'll talk a little bit about that during the course of our presentation. Liz also happens to be the latest Mason graduate that we've had an opportunity to recruit to CSX. She joined us in 2013 in our leadership development program, and we have very high expectations for her career at our company. Sean, I've known since he first joined the company back in 2005. He doesn't have any degrees from Mason, but his schools are equally impressive. And I can tell you I've never met an individual as smart as Sean, and he has been a tremendous asset to me and to our company. As for me, as Shaquita said, I've been working way too long out of school. We won't count the years. But needless to say, William and Mary has a warm spot in my heart. Like many of you, I'm sure, you can relate to how I was feeling when I was in your shoes some 25 plus years ago. I had never thought about working for a railroad company. And that changed one day when Hayes Watkins, who was then chairman and CEO of CSX, came here to speak as part of an executive forum. And he spoke with great passion about the company's vision, its strategy for the future, and it was very much like that line in the movie Jerry Maguire, Hayes had me at hello. And you know, one thing leads to another, and here I am 25 plus years later, still working for the same company. I'm hoping today that the three of us will be able to give you a sense of the excitement and the passion that we have in working for a company that really is at the center of the circulatory system of the U.S. and macroeconomy, and a company that is also ranked by Fortune magazine as a top 250 and most admired company. But before we get into the presentation, I want to give you a very short video. It's a video really of imagery. There are very few words in this video, and none are spoken. But I hope you get a sense that this is not your grandfather's railroad. This is a company that is driven by the latest and greatest technology. It's driven by talented and diverse people, and it's driven by a passion to be the best. Well, that was hello. So hopefully I have some of you on board. But if not, we have many more slides that we can go through and we can talk about the company. We've divided this presentation really into 3 sections. I'm going to talk a little bit about CSX and what the company does and its business. I'm going to turn the presentation over to Sean, who's going to talk a little bit about our finance organization, our recruiting process, and how that works. And you'll get a sense of what I was talking about before. This is not your typical finance organization that you might come across. And then finally, Liz, being our most recent graduate from our leadership development program, will come and talk about her experience in the leadership development program, how it works, one of her projects that she's accomplished, and then as well talk with you about some of the other opportunities besides the full-time leadership development program, career opportunities that we have in finance. We also have summer internships and positions in other departments within our company. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. First of all, just to let you know, Jacksonville is where we're headquartered. And for those of you that are not familiar with Jacksonville, Jacksonville is the 12th largest city in the U.S. It's about 1.5 million population. And there's a saying in Florida that the further north you go geographically, the further south you go culturally, which is to say that we're much less like Miami, West Palm Beach, the land of Mickey Mouse, and more like Atlanta, Charlotte, Richmond, okay? We're also a very temperate climate community, as you can see. And as you look across the temperatures across the various seasons, you'll see that spring, summer, fall, pretty much the same temperatures you have here. The big difference is winter, right? We're much warmer. We don't have to worry about shoveling snow and ice and sleet and all those bad things that you have to deal with up here. And as a result, we tend to be more of an outdoor community. And so whether you're taking in a Jaguars game at Everbank Stadium, you're on the TPC golf course playing a round of 18, you're going to the beach, you're in one of our parks having a picnic with your family, this very much is an outdoor community that you have an opportunity to do these things almost on a year-round basis. Of course, there are things to do inside. We have many good, fine restaurants. We have the Symphony, we have Broadway plays, we have a country music festival, jazz music festival, rock concerts that come touring through Jacksonville. So there's always something constantly to do. It's a very vibrant city. The other thing that I'll tell you is that on the far right-hand side of the screen, as you can see, is that we're rated fairly highly. Whether it's in job growth, as ranked by Forbes or Business Week, or whether you're talking about families, right? Being one of the top 30 communities in the country for raising families. I think that speaks well of the company, or speaks well of the city that we reside in. So if you haven't considered Jacksonville before, something to think about. All right, let's talk about the company. CSX is one of the leading transportation companies in North America. And as you can see from our network spans the eastern United States and covers all of what we call the mega region areas, which is where all the big metropolitan cities reside in the eastern United States. And one of the things that I'll give you a sense of is that really our network is on top of one of the richest population areas in the country. 2/3 of the US population resides in the eastern United States, and that's about the same amount of consumption that occurs in this United States. And that's important because we move what we consume, right? So we are, in essence, fishing where the fish are. Those green dots that are up and down the Atlantic coast and along the Gulf Coast are port facilities that we connect to that broaden our reach to the overseas markets and places like China, Hong Kong, Singapore, Europe, etc. So we're very well connected, both domestically and internationally. And then finally, those blue circles, these are my favorite circles on our map. This represents market reach, and it represents market reach that Brand X, aka Norfolk Southern, doesn't have direct access into. So we have the upper Northeast and into Canada, and we also have the state of Florida, which is one of the fastest growing states, as you know, in the country. We're also, as I mentioned earlier, a Fortune 250 company. And as you can see, is $12 billion of revenue. It's about $3.5 billion of operating income, nearly a 30% margin, $2 billion worth of earnings, and actually, as of today, about a $32 billion market cap, and an enterprise value that's $10 billion higher. I say, well, that's great. I know a lot of companies that are that big. Well, you might, but companies that you're going to be seeing, companies that are in this area, from Owens & Minor to Norfolk Southern to Dominion Resources to Hilton Hotels, they're all nice-sized companies, but CSX is larger, more profitable than those companies. Now, you might think, well, there's some nice brand name companies that I'd like to work for. And so let's talk about some of those. So the most recent world's largest airline, American Airlines. We make more money than they do. Of course, that's pretty easy to do. Airlines don't make a lot of money. So I'm not making a big statement there. But we also make more money than the #1 auto rental car company, Hertz. Visa might be everywhere that you would like for it to be, but we're bigger than Visa. And you might like drinking the highest priced coffee in America at Starbucks, but they don't make as much money as we do. And you might love all of the shows that CBS has with all their #1 programs, but again, they don't make as much money as we do. We can ship things overnight, and they can get there by 10 o'clock the next morning, but that's not going to make you more money than CSX. And then finally, we've got KKR, who could help you buy any one of these companies on this chart, but they're not going to make as much money as CSX. Let me tell you a little bit about our track record. This has been an extraordinary decade, and you can see the numbers on the screen, and pretty much by any financial measure that you would want to measure CSX by, we're going to be in the top quartile of the S&P 500. Let me say that again, top quartile of the S&P 500 across almost any financial dimension. You look at operating income, we're up 7-fold, right? Margins up 4 times, earnings per share up 20 times what we were 10 years ago. And what has this led to? This has led to tremendous stock performance. So you can say, well, you might be, lying a little bit about this top quartile. This is the, lie detector test, right? I'm not lying, because if I were lying, that blue shaded region wouldn't be where it is, right? You invest $100 in CSX 10 years ago, you got $500 today. You do the same thing with a transportation company in the Dow Jones Transportation Index, you got about $250, $300 today. And if you do something in the S&P 500, maybe $150, $200. Okay? So this is success, right? Now, of course, we all know stock prices are not about the past. They're about the future. And what are you going to do for me tomorrow? So I can tell you what we're going to do. And the nice thing about our business is that we're driven by a very simple formula, yet it's a very elegant formula, right? More people, population growth, over time are going to consume more things, global GDP, and those things have to be moved. International trade, right? And what are the things that we move? Well, pretty much anything in your life, in my life, is what we move. So starting on the far left-hand side of this pie in the 2 blue shaded regions, which we call our domestic and international intermodal business, these are the containers that come in on container ships from these faraway places overseas, and they're also the containers that show up on the highways, in a Schneider van or J.B. Hunt or Swift, Old Dominion. For those of you that are familiar with the things that are passing you by and making your life miserable on the highways, right? We take those containers, we put them on our railroad, we ship them the long haul, we give them back to the trucking company at the end, they do the local pickup and delivery. And what are in these containers? Well, a variety of things, right? Electronics, clothing, furniture, just to name a few. If we move around the pie a little bit further, we got chemicals. And chemicals is a very broad market, all right? So the plastics that go into this bottle are in this market, as well as the crude oil that comes out of the Bakken and other shale regions around the country. that get moved into the refineries and then are made into gasoline that goes into your car, right? Steel. We move the steel that not only helps build America in the sense of the buildings like Miller Hall, but also things that go into these shale drilling regions, right? So you need steel to drill for all of this oil and gas that we're doing in these shale regions. And then, of course, steel goes into automobiles, and we move that steel as well. When it comes to automobiles, we move over a third of all the automobiles produced in this country at CSX. So there are a lot of other railroads, a lot of other transportation companies, but we're moving a third of those automobiles. So you look out in the parking lot, 3 out of every 10 we've moved. You move a little bit further around and you're talking about the agricultural sector. So this is the part of our business that brings food to your table. So whether we're talking corn, wheat, soybean, ethanol before it's put into fuel, we're moving those items from origin to destination. We're moving the phosphates that provide the nutrients in the ground that make these crops possible. And then, of course, we're moving the food, whether it's refrigerated or not, that shows up on your breakfast table or your dining room table. You move a little bit further around the pie, and then you also see sort of our construction sector. So forest products, the lumber, the wood that goes into buildings, the aggregates, the cement that goes into making the foundations, and the support for the superstructures. And then, of course, the waste. It's not a sexy business, but it is a business. And unfortunately, we have a lot of large metropolitan areas that are full with their local landfills. So that trash, that debris has to be hauled somewhere. And it gets hauled into more rural areas where those landfills are located. And then finally, we bring you energy, right? Coal. Now, it may sound like, that's a dirty old business, but the fact of the matter is 40% of every building in America is still powered by coal. And that's not a reality that's going to change anytime in the near future, quite frankly, because we don't have the infrastructure in natural gas, nuclear, wind, water, solar, et cetera, to make up for the 40% that is currently provided by coal. So we're going to be around for a while transporting coal to give you and I energy. So that's our business. Let's talk a little bit about the culture of a company, the essence of a company, right? And I always think that the best place to find out about a company is when you look at what the company stands for, right? Its vision statement, its purpose, its core values. So the vision statement: be the safest, most progressive North American railroad, relentless in the pursuit of customer and employee excellence. Our purpose is to capitalize on the efficiencies of rail transportation to meet the growing needs of American corporations. And finally, our values. It starts with the customer. God, I hope so. Any business that doesn't have that as a core value is not going to be in business very long. People make the difference. Safety is a way of life. Get the right results the right way, and be fact-based about it. Now, of all these things on this chart, one thing that's not there: make more money, create shareholder value. And why is that? Because if you are relentless in pursuing customer and employee excellence, if you're going to be fact-based, if you're going to get the right results the right way and be ethical about it, you will create value, you will make more money. The other thing I would tell you about this chart, and it's not by accident, is that there are two constituencies that show up twice on this chart. The first is the customer, right? We said it starts with the customer, and we're focused relentlessly on customer excellence. We need to treat our customers like their family, like we are part of their business so that we can succeed as they succeed. That is an important principle of any business. And I would encourage you, as you think about your own career searches, to think about that concept. The other thing is employees, right? We're focused on employee excellence. People make the difference. Companies exist, but people make great companies. And you're going to hear today that we are after the best and the brightest, right? All the rest of the companies, they can have the rest. At CSX, we want the best people. We're focused on employee excellence. We're going to give you the tools to continue to develop in your career to be the best that you possibly can be. So I hope you think about that, because that, for us at CSX, that is how tomorrow moves, by focusing on those two things. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Sean, who's going to talk about our finance department and talk a little bit more about our recruiting process. Sean?
Thank you, David. So as David said, I've been with the company now almost a decade, and in that, if I sort of rewind back to when I started with CSX and what was it that brought me to a railroad, it was not anything that I pictured myself doing when I was a child. I certainly, like any child, was interested in what railroads did, but I never thought of myself as a railroader. The things that really sold me about CSX were everything that David just told you about the company, its history, and where it was going, the culture of winning that we really have at CSX. But it was also the finance organization and the way that organization was structured. I've got sort of the basic org chart up here behind me, and what I really want to draw your attention to, there's lots of squares and lots of things on here, are three main points. And the first one is the red dotted lines that you see going up from several of those vice president titles up to the business leaders. Because the way that we organize within the finance organization at CSX is we are business partners to our frontline leaders in the organization. So we've got a seat at the table at their staff meetings. We're trusted advisors. Think of us almost as internal consultants for those business partners. And we've done enough over the last decade to really earn a reputation where they're going to turn to us first and look to us to be a part of the process as they're ultimately developing their strategy. And just to give you an example of that, where I happen to fall within this org chart is I report directly to the Vice President of Operations Finance all the way on the left-hand side of the chart. So what does that mean? That means that I get involved in the decisions around how many crews do we need, how many locomotives do we need, what's the service plan that we're going to have, what's the train plan that we have. Long term, how do we see the economy evolving? What are the macro and micro factors that are going to drive change in our business? And what do we need to do to respond to those changes? Whether it's building infrastructure or changing the way that we serve our customers or putting in new tools, technology, and processes to be cutting edge. And so I was just in a meeting 24 hours ago in Jacksonville with the executive members of our corporation, the 6 titles you see up at the top, as well as my boss and the key operating leaders. And we were sitting around the table and having a very frank and open discussion about how many locomotives and how many crews do we need next year based on the volume growth projections that we're expecting and based on the level of service that we want to be able to provide to our customers. So we've got that dialogue going on, and we're an integral part in the finance organization of a dialogue like that. I happen to support the operating department, but within our finance group, we actually have 3 main sort of business partner support groups. One is with sales and marketing, and so those are the people who are selling the freight, who are interfacing with customers. We've got an organization that helps them to make the right decisions from a price-volume trade-off as well as a service perspective. And then we have our traditional sort of corporate finance roles, supporting tax and treasury, supporting investor relations, where David is, supporting our tools and technologies that ultimately help us to make the right decisions. So that's, when you think about coming in and joining CSX's finance department, those are generally the areas that you're going to be coming into. The other thing that I really liked and that really attracted me about the organizational structure at CSX was how flat it is. David showed you the statistics as well as the comparisons around, hey, we're a really big company. We're bigger than many companies that you know very well. And you might not necessarily think of us that way, but we are. Fortune 250 company, but we feel in many ways like a very small company. I just mentioned to you 24 hours ago I was sitting with the entire executive team. That's not something that's going to happen at most large corporations. Everything is headquartered in Jacksonville. All of our functions are there. And so we've got great ability to interface with the vice president level as well as the executive level on a daily basis. Every day you're going to be riding on the elevator with a VP or with an executive vice president of our company, and you'll have an opportunity to interface with them, which I think is a really unique thing about CSX. The last thing I want to point out around our org chart, and David would certainly not be happy if I didn't point this out, is those little boxes down at the bottom of the chart with the William and Mary alumni, as David's already alluded to, David being one of them, as well as David Bohr, our treasurer, or the head of our tax and treasury group. And so we've got a rich history of tradition with William and Mary, and we've had a lot of students that have been successful, as well as obviously Liz Burrows, who happens to work for me now and has done a tremendous job coming through our leadership development program and now kind of coming out of it and been very successful. So what are the things that we're looking for at CSX? And more broadly, how is the role of corporate finance evolving? We actually do a lot of research with the Corporate Executive Board, an organization that ultimately is trying to figure out the answer to questions like that. And one of the things that's emerged in their resource is this evolution of corporate finance from being sort of these stodgy folks who are all about governance. Hey, you've got a budget, you have to stick to that budget, and I'm going to hold you to it, and if you don't, you've broken the rules, and I'm going to tell on you. And that's kind of what finance was always about. And you analyze a project, and you spit out the numbers, and you decide whether you're going to invest or not invest in that project, and that's all there is to it. That's traditionally how finance was organized and how it was presented. What we've evolved to, and certainly at CSX, is a culture around business partnership and decision support systems. So what we want to do is we want to earn a seat at the table, we want to be involved in those strategic conversations, but we also need to look for people who are able to not only do the analytical grounding and be able to execute there, but people who can also influence business partners, who can tell a story, who can communicate and sort of bring together various viewpoints, build consensus, and ultimately help to drive the strategy of the organization to make the right decisions. So what are the things that we're looking for in a person who ultimately can be successful there? Well, there are 5 different competencies that the Corporate Executive Board talks about. The first 2 are kind of the basics. We call them the price of admission. The learner competency and the doer competency. Chances are everybody that's here in this room has been accepted and is doing well here at William and Mary is going to be very good as a learner and also as a doer. You've accomplished a certain amount in your life so far, and you've been recognized for that, and so you've got that level of individual success. You're going to bring that with you when you go to a corporation, and you're going to have to rely on it. You need to be able to absorb, you need to have an open mind, you need to ask for feedback, you need to organize, you need to execute, you need to do what the boss tells you to do. All of those things are critically important to your individual success. But the things that are required for you to drive the success of the organization are a little bit different. Those things are sort of higher up in the evolutionary scale of competencies. And those things are the ones that are in blue there. Those are the things that can really differentiate somebody who will be a very successful individual performer from somebody who really has leadership potential and can really drive an organization forward. So those 3 competencies, as you see up on the board, are the persuader, the strategist, and the builder. Those are the things that I've been talking about that really make us stand out at CSX as a finance organization. And our success there has largely been driven by the fact that we've been recruiting essentially for those 3 competencies. The first 2 are sort of the litmus tests. You've got to have them. But what we're also looking for is the plus. It's, do you have the ability to tell a story? Do you have the ability to convince somebody? Do you kind of get the need to pre-sell your ideas, to get people behind you, and to ultimately create a vision that others can sort of coalesce around? If you've got the ability to do that, that's what we're looking for in a potential candidate. And so what you see here on this chart, let me just clear the percentages for you first. The percentages represent how influential having that competency is on whether you're going to be able to drive organizational value. Will you be able to actually take part in those strategic conversations? So what you see is that having strength in the learner and doer competency actually does very little for the organization as a whole. It'll help you to be successful individually, but it won't help the organization. If you really want to drive value for the organization, you've got to think about being a persuader, a strategist, and a builder. And that's where the real value comes from. So when we're going out to campuses and we're recruiting, the first stage of that recruiting process is going to be to weed out the folks who don't pass the litmus test of learner and doer. And I'm going to talk about that in a second. How do we go about evaluating that? And once we've done that, once we've kind of narrowed that field down and we've got the folks who are technically competent enough and who are willing to do the work, then we're looking for that extra emotional intelligence that shows up in those 3 other competencies. And we have ways of testing for that later on in the process that help us to really understand, are you someone who we're bringing in who we can coach and teach, but ultimately has the long-term potential to be a leader in our organization? So how do we go about doing that? How do we test for those things? The first thing that we've done, and this process has been evolutionary over the time that I've been at CSX, and we've really added a lot to it. But the first thing is simple. It's interviews. And the way that we do our interviews is very much situational. So we're going to ask you about a time when you were able to influence a team to make a decision and move something forward, right? And so what we typically find is that students are going to give us 2 potential wrong answers to that question. The first one is they're going to tell us about a time when they were part of a team that did something and it was something wonderful, right? But what they don't do is tell us what their role specifically was within that team, how they individually went about persuading, influencing, building strategy, getting people to coalesce around them, those kinds of competencies that we're ultimately looking for. The second thing that we find is people who don't or aren't able to demonstrate humility. They come in and they tell us, as an intern, I really drove the strategy of a Fortune 250 company and was able to change completely, the direction of the company within my 6-week internship. That's highly unlikely. It's possible. If you were able to do that, you'd probably be hired as an executive for that company. So we're a little skeptical when we hear things like that. What we're really looking for is somebody to provide an example of a place, and it could be, as president of the sorority as you were an undergrad, or it could be, in the internship job that you had, or it could be as a graduate assistant, something that you were able to do. You could draw from whatever experiences you've got, and don't feel like you need to do any self-aggrandizement. Just simply tell us what you've done, what your role has been within that process, and it's okay if it wasn't, hey, I was the head of something and I really drove it from beginning to end. We're certainly looking for those leadership qualities, but we also want you to demonstrate a level of humility about it. So those are the situational interviews that we'll put you through, and we actually do a series of those. We come on campus and do a first round, and then we have you come to Jacksonville if you've passed that first round, and we'll do some additional interviews while you're in Jacksonville. And the other thing that we do in the recruiting process is the case study. And the case study is absolutely critical because it can show us things that we won't necessarily see show up on the interview. You can be very good and prepare very well for those interviews, and you'll be a shining star, and we'll say, hey, that person, that individual looks like they'll be a great fit for us. They've been able to demonstrate the competencies that we're looking for, but then how did they do on the case study? So the way we do the case study actually has nothing to do with the railroad industry at all. We're not trying to test your knowledge of railroading. What we're really trying to understand is when presented with an issue that has a little bit of gray area in it, it's got some strategic implications, it's got some analytical work that's going to have to be done to set the groundwork for the case. Are you able to get into the details of the case, understand what the main problem is, and then ultimately articulate a solution, and then stand behind it and defend it? That's sort of what we're looking for. At the end of the day, your ability to do that in a way that's clear and concise, in a way that convinces us as the case panel that you've done the right analysis and you've been able to convince us that we ought to move forward on your recommendation, That's what we're looking for. We actually see a wide variety of answers to our case study, and we've hired people across the spectrum, people who've recommended, option A and people who've recommended option Z and anything in between. So it's not so much the right or wrong answer that we're looking for, it's whether you can demonstrate those competencies that we've been talking about. So how does that kind of progress as you go through that process? This is a chart that shows you last year where, sort of the funnel getting down all the way to the people who we brought on board at the end of the day, the 10 folks that are now at CSX and just started with us about a month ago. So the first step in that process actually isn't on this chart. You'll want to submit your resume to us, and Liz will talk a little bit about the nuts and bolts of doing that. Once we've looked at the resumes and it looks like you might be a good fit, we're going to give you a finance quiz. It's a real basic quiz. It's not meant to be anything advanced. All we want to do, again, is test, are you a learner? Do you have the ability to execute on core financial concepts? And a lot of it is just math. And are you able to do it under some time pressure when you're in the middle of your classwork and all the other things that you've got going on? If you're able to pass that financial quiz, you're going to move on to the next stage, which is the on-campus interview. And that on-campus interview will be a situational interview like we talked about. There'll be a number of different questions, 4 to 6 questions probably, that we'll go through. And then on top of that, we've actually added something new this year to that situational interview. We've got what we call sort of a financial statement exercise. And it's really not so much about analyzing financial statements as it is, again, about are you able to take a look at some facts, get down to the main issue, and then communicate it back to us. What would you do if you saw financials like this, that looked like this? So we're really, again, trying to screen out those who don't have that learner and doer competency, but also screen in those who have the ability to influence and to tell a story. And once we've done those on-campus interviews, we then bring a number of folks, about 50% of those who we interview on campus, we bring down to Jacksonville. We want you to see what it's like down there. We want you to get a really good feel for the company. We want you to see what the organization and the finance department feel like. And by the way, there's only 80 of us across the entire finance organization. That doesn't include our controllers group. Our controllers group has more. But within the core finance functions that we're hiring for right now, there's only 80 people at an organization that has 30,000. So it feels very intimate. You'll get a good sense of that when you come down to Jacksonville. When you're in Jacksonville, we'll do more of those screening interviews. We'll do the case study interview. You've got roughly a week to prepare for that case study. And then ultimately, we'll provide offers for those who succeed on all of those steps along the way. Last year, we gave 17 offers, and we had 10 folks who accepted the offer and have now come down to Jacksonville. So at the end of the day, starts with a very big pool, ends up with a relatively small number. And so that's what the organization is like. That's what the recruiting process is like. I'm going to turn it over to Liz right now to give you a sense of what it actually is like once you're in Jacksonville and you're a part of the leadership development program.
So it's great to be back. I graduated from Mason in 2013 and then came to CSX in July of that year. And I'm very happy and thrilled to be a part of the team. So I'll just talk a little bit about specifically the Leadership Development Program, which is the full-time program. It's a 6-month rotational program within 3 different departments in finance. It's designed to recruit the top talent and develop future leaders at CSX. So during those 6 months, you'll rotate within 3 different departments, the 3 departments that Sean talked about, and you'll have the opportunity to network with nearly everybody within the finance organization. You'll develop your technical, analytical, and leadership skills, and then at the end of those 6 months, you'll be given a full-time offer within one of the 3 departments at CSX. One of my favorite parts about the Leadership Development Program in particular is the fact that the 3 projects that you work on are real business projects. You really have the opportunity to drive business results. So from the moment that you walk in the door at CSX, you're given a lot of responsibility and a great opportunity to really influence things at the company very early on in your career. So a little bit more about the projects. Each project is roughly 6 weeks long, and during that time, you'll be expected to gather data, analyze that information, and ultimately make a recommendation. You will then deliver a presentation to the senior finance team, which includes the vice president and oftentimes the CFO. And I can speak from personal experience talking with my colleagues that graduated with me, the level of exposure that you'll get at CSX is really unique. I don't know nearly anybody that has interacted and interfaced as much with senior management, with the CFO as I have. Also in this program, you'll have the opportunity to have dinner with the vice presidents. You will have an orientation as well as ongoing training, and you'll get to witness our field operations firsthand out in the field. So this is actually an example of one of my leadership development projects, and it's really a testament to what I was talking about before, the fact that this is a real project that really drives company results. This is a project that is still very much a part of CSX's operations today. In fact, it's funny, just yesterday I had a meeting regarding this project. So my task was to develop an optimal days of service model. So when you think about a train, you have a locomotive and then you have 100 or so cars behind that locomotive. And one part of our business is what we call unit business. So it's a locomotive with one commodity, so 100 cars of coal with one customer. Then we have another part of our business, which is the intermodal business, which are the containers that David was talking about coming off of a ship onto a train, then onto a truck. And then another large part of our business is what we call our merchandise business. So this is a locomotive where you have maybe 3 cars of paper, 2 cars carrying plastic, 1 car with chemicals, and those are all different commodities coming from different customers and going to different customers. So you can imagine we really have to focus on our logistics. Additionally, CSX is a very asset-intensive company. We own our own rail, we own our locomotives, we own many of our cars, and so a big focus in operations is to utilize those assets in the most efficient way possible. And one of the measures of asset utilization, so a measure that we call car dwell, so the amount of time that a car sits. And the chart below shows you it's no surprise that car dwell increases the lower the days that we serve the customer. So if we're visiting the customer every day, 7 days a week, we're turning those assets quicker than customers that we visit less than 7 days a week. So my project specifically looked at those merchandise customers that are served less than 7 days a week to determine where we might be able to increase our days of service to those customers without incrementally increasing the cost to the company. So I looked at train maps, I pulled together operations information, I pulled together commercial information to develop a methodology and a model that helps CSX make those decisions. And we've actually found quite a bit of opportunity. And this really creates a win-win for CSX because if we're serving our customer more frequently, then that's good for the customer. They get more regular service, and we might be able to translate that into future pricing gains, or maybe the customer wants to ship more volume with us. But it's also good for CSX because we're using our assets more efficiently, which can help us delay capital spend, or if we're paying rent on those assets, it helps reduce operating expense. As Sean talked about, the way that our finance organization is set up is unique. And so we really do act as internal consultants to the different business departments at the company. And so it's no surprise that since 2004, over 40 LDPs have actually moved on to different parts of the company. And that's encouraged within finance because we really get to know all of the different business areas. So there's really an opportunity to have quite a vibrant and diverse career at CSX. So this is the timeline. Hopefully after this presentation, you all will go on to Mason Link and apply. The deadline is coming up quickly, it's September 10th, and that's really because we want to have offers in your hands in end of October, November. So September 10th is the deadline. First round interviews will be in September, second round interviews will be in October, and then we'll distribute offers in late October, November, and the program starts in July. Additionally, you might have seen on Mason Link that we have other opportunities in our sales and marketing LDP program, which is similar in structure to the finance LDP program in that it's a 6-month program, and at the end of that 6 months, you'll be offered a full-time position. And there are 2 opportunities in particular within sales and marketing. One is as a market manager, where you will really get to know an industry, conduct research on that industry, recommend new market development, and help set pricing and contract parameters. Or as an account manager, this is more of a customer interfacing role, so you'll help to work on customer solutions, you'll help negotiate contract and prices. Additionally, there are other options within operations and technology, and so if you're interested in either one of those opportunities, please talk to one of the three of us, and we'll make sure that we connect you to the correct person at the company. And then for those first years in the room, we offer a 10-week-long internship program. It's a paid internship, and this is really like a mini LDP program. So you're given a project that's almost identical to one of the three projects that you have as an LDP. You still get the same level of exposure, the same level of responsibility, similar training, and then if you are successful in that program, you might leave the summer with an offer to come back as an LDP and a full-time employee. So with that, I'll turn it over to David to close us out.
Thank you, Liz. Still not working? Oh, there we are working now. Good. Before I close, let me show you something. I talked at the very beginning about this is not your grandfather's railroad. And what you're about to see is the latest advancement in transportation. It's called our Northwest Ohio Intermodal Facility. And much like Federal Express uses Memphis to bring all of their planes that have all of their US packages into that one central location to sort and then load those packages back on those planes to go to their ultimate destination markets, we use Northwest Ohio for that same purpose. Now our packages, our containers, are a lot bigger. And the video that we're about ready to show you isn't going to give you any justice in terms of the size, the scale, the scope of this thing. But let me tell you a few statistics. This thing from one end to the other is 5 miles long. There are 7 large gantry cranes that do the lifting of all these containers. And each one of these cranes is about 100 feet tall. So that's like a 10-story building. They're also about 300 feet wide. And they span 8 tracks. So we can have 8 sets of trains rolling into this facility at any time, day or night, and then those cranes move back and forth across those 5 miles, across all those trains, sorting the containers, some for local delivery, some between the trains, and then those trains, very much like the FedEx planes, leave Northwest Ohio and go to the destination market. And those containers are never touched again until they get to that destination market. This facility is a one of a kind in the world. There is nothing else like it on the planet. And like I said, it is the latest advancement in technology for CSX, the latest advancement in transportation. So let me roll the film, and you can get a sense of what I'm talking about. That's how tomorrow moves, all right? These words up on the chart, relentless pursuit of excellence, you've now seen them 3 times. I hope you've gotten a sense through the course of our presentation about how relentless we are in attracting the very best and the brightest across the campuses that we have relationships with. As an executive and corporate officer of CSX, I clearly would love for you to apply, whether that be a job in our finance leadership development program, sales and marketing leadership development program, or a summer internship. As a William & Mary alumni, I will tell you that these words, relentless pursuit of excellence, they're very important for you. If you don't pursue CSX, if you pursue another company, do the due diligence. Look for the embodiment of these words. They may not say the same words. They may not say relentless pursuit of excellence. They may not say that they want to be the best. But it is important in your due diligence that you find that feeling, that sense, that essence within every company that you're going to apply, because those are the companies that are going to try to get competitive advantage. They're the companies that are going to grow. They're the companies that are going to create value for shareholders. And by extension, they're going to create career opportunities for you. So with that, why don't we open it up for questions, and we'll answer any and all that you may have. Yes?
How did the process for applying for an internship, is it similar or the same as the process for the leadership development program?
It is. Sean, you want to walk them through that?
Yeah, so, okay. So the process is largely the same. The initial application, the finance screening, the on-campus interview, those are all exactly the same. And then once you come to Jacksonville, which, same kind of concept, there will be a case study. The case study is slightly different than the one we use for the leadership development program, but it's really getting at the same things. We're looking for the same qualities, because ultimately the reason we have the internship program available is so that we can find folks during that 10-week period who are a good fit for us long term. And we do hire very frequently out of that internship program. So yes.
Yes.
I know you guys were talking about being the market manager, and I thought that was really interesting. So do y'all have any internships more related to that field if you don't think that you're quite sure if you're ready for finance?
It's working.
Okay. I can follow up on the sales and marketing internship. I'm not sure if there is, but I never thought that finance was something that I would pursue, but I would very much encourage you to take advantage of the finance internship program, even if you think that it piques your interest just a little bit. As you saw from my project description, it's not necessarily what you would think of as traditional finance. I'd say I do traditional finance about 50% of my job, and then the other 50% is really operations. And so similarly, if you were in a commercial role, you would get sort of a similar experience. But I'll follow up on that and make sure that the career office has those details.
And just to follow up a little bit on what Liz was saying, if you come in to the finance leadership development program as an intern, you will have the opportunity to work with the sales and marketing people, and of course develop a good rapport with the folks that ultimately could be making a decision next year when you're looking for full-time career opportunities. And as you've seen from some of our charts, a lot of the people that come into our leadership development program in finance do end up in other organizations within the company.
I hear David talking about the due diligence of the company before we want to work for the company, and Sean talking about the basically flatter management level of the company. So I just want to ask you a question about the corporate culture, because I really care about that. So in CSX, do you have a lot of meetings and how such meetings would be? Because in my previous companies, we have meetings basically twice a week. And then each meeting is about 2 hours, and we talked a lot about the management decision making. And what do you expect to get from those meetings?
Yeah, it's a great question. There are several types of meetings that you can have. I mean, we have staff meetings, obviously, which is more just making sure we keep everybody on the same page. And so, I go to the CFO staff meeting, and we find out what's happening at the executive team level and some of the latest things that are happening within the business. And then, of course, we have staff meetings with the people in our organizations to keep them informed. So there's always that sort of information flow from top to bottom. Then you're going to be meeting with your business partners, right? So Sean talked about the fact that if you come into finance, you're going to be working either in operations finance, commercial finance, corporate finance, and you're going to have external partners. You'll need to be meeting with them. And not so much just to have FaceTime, but this is really about managing the project, right? Bringing people along, being able to influence and communicate the project at various points along the way of its phase. So those are the kinds of meetings that you're going to have. They are meetings that are designed to have impact, right? In addition to the other meetings, which we talked about, which are staff meetings that we have as a normal course of just simply keeping you informed. And then more broadly, a few times a year, we get all the leadership members together of the company with our chairman, Michael Ward, and his executive staff, really taking a frontline communication responsibility for communicating, hey, where are we going over the next 3 to 5 years? What are the things that we need to be focused on? And so those things happen. But, the culture of our company is one that I think Sean really captured it very well. We are a close-knit family. We're an accountable family. You are expected to do well. We're going to give you the tools to do well, but we do support each other like a family. We get along with each other like a family. We have many relationships with our colleagues like a family, right? So it's that kind of culture that I would say symbolizes CSX. Sean, Liz, would you add anything?
Yeah, so probably the one thing I would add to that is within the finance organization, the culture that you're going to find is people who are highly motivated, who are engaged, who really care about the company, and who do a phenomenal job at understanding the facts and then telling the story. We've really made a name for ourselves as sort of that consultant role, and the reason for that is because of what we've done on the hiring process and bringing folks in who have that. The one other thing I wanted to point out, Liz neglected to mention this, is that when you come into the Leadership Development Program, you are, on a mandatory basis, part of our fund committee. And yes, we do have to have a committee for fund. We are in corporate finance after all. So you have a sense of that as well, and that really helps to build some teamwork and some sort of collaboration across our finance organization with the 80 people. So we do picnics, we do Jaguar games, we do golf outings and birthdays and happy hours and all those kinds of things.
And once a month birthdays with literal games that we play. So.
Thank you. I'm an international student. My background was engineering. So I just started my finance class the last 3 weeks because your deadline will be due next week. It seemed that I stand very little to, I'm interested doing internship in finance, but because very little exposure to finance. How do you provide the chance for people like me?
Yeah, so it's a great question. As Sean said, a lot of the things that we're looking for are not necessarily based in your financial prowess, so to speak. To be perfectly honest, one of our prior chief financial officers was an engineer by training. And what we have found actually is that there's a lot of commonality between how engineers look at things and how finance people look at things in sort of a structured way. So I don't think necessarily that you would be at a disadvantage in coming in and applying and going through the process. We're looking for your ability to critically think problems through. As an engineer, you certainly were faced with many of those types of situations where you had problems and you had to critically think about what is the right solution. But we're also looking for how you convey your recommendations, how you communicate, how you influence, right? So those are those attributes that Sean showed that we're looking for. So the technical side, you'll learn this year, and we can teach you those things, right? We're less concerned about the things that we can teach. We're far more concerned about the things that are more innate, right? Things you're either born with and you have, or you don't have. You either have the ability to lead people, influence people, guide people, and develop change in an organization, or you don't to a large degree. Some of it we can teach, some of it we can't. But if you've got those skills, the finance versus engineering part, I wouldn't worry about so much. Fair, Sean? Mm-hmm. Next question. Come on, there's nearly 200 people in this room.
Well, me representing international students, have you provided sponsorship to any international student, or do you have any international in your team, in the team in finance?
We do. Now there's a little bit of a double-edged sword on this one. We're not going to exclude those people that need sponsorship from the interview process, but the bar is very high, right, for us to go through the process of sponsoring an international student. So you would really have to rank at the top end of the people that we will want to extend offers to. But if you go through that process and we see the value in your thinking and the value of your softer skills, your EQ, so to speak, as well as the IQ components of your personality, if you've got what it takes to succeed at CSX, we will work with you through that sponsorship. But we're not going to work through that sponsorship issue for just anybody. You're going to have to excel.
It's somewhat off topic, but about the company itself, I just wondered, a two-part question, kind of, what would you consider your closest competitor? And have you in the past, or do you think in the future you'd ever consider, since you own your own rails, passenger line and involved with some of the all the freight that you do?
Yeah, it's a great question. We have numerous competitors. Norfolk Southern is our most direct competitor in the eastern United States. Their network is fairly similar to ours, except they weren't in those two blue circles that we talked about. In addition, we compete against trucking companies, in addition to trying to partner with them to bring the freight off of the highways and onto the intermodal platform. We compete with barge. We compete with Jones Act shipping companies. We compete with air freight logistics companies. So it is a very competitive, dynamic world, and it is very competitive in that sense. People think of railroads as the monopoly board, and we have monopoly, so we don't have to do very much to get our business. But no, we fight for our business every day. Your second question about, what was it again?
Passengers?
Yeah, that's right. I was trying to void that one out of my mind completely. No, we don't like passenger rail. There's no passenger rail system in the world that makes money, right? I mean, when you talk about going to Europe and you take those fabulous high-speed trains, the maglev trains and everything, they're fantastic, but they don't make any money. So we want to make money. We want to create shareholder value. When you think about Amtrak, it doesn't make money, right? It's funded by the government, and every year they go to Congress asking for more money, more money, more money. And the criminal thing is that, unfortunately, while Amtrak has a small portion of their network that they run their own trains over their own tracks, they are squatters on our lines and a lot of other railroad lines, and they still can't make money. So no, we would never consider passenger. That's a good question. Next question, here we go.
Thank you for your introduction. I'm just curious about your operating margin increase, because based on my knowledge and work experience, the operating margin increased so much as seldom to see. I want to know the main factor about this increase.
Yeah, it's a great question. So CSX, at the beginning of the 10-year period, was a little bit in a turnaround situation, but we focused on two principal things. One was price and one was productivity. So driving price of the shipments that we were moving across the country and also doing it more efficiently. And the combination of that unlocked a lot of value. Today we live in a very different world where the next 10 years of value creation is going to be a little bit more balanced. It's going to be about volume growth to capture new opportunities. It's going to be about continuing to price and continuing to do things more efficiently. But that's how that operating margin really accelerated the rate of improvement, was as part of our turnaround story, focusing on those two issues. Yes? CSX, prior to the 10-year period, was sort of a multimodal conglomerate. So we used to own container ships, a logistics company, a barge company. We had hotels. At one point, we even had an oil and gas transmission company. We decided that we wanted to grow up and be a railroad. And when we did that, we also decided that it was time to change the way that we thought about the railroad business and how we ran the railroad business. So we actually realigned our management team. When Sean talked about the fact that this organization is very flat, that makes it very intimate, but it also makes it very accountable. So when Shakita was introducing me and telling you that I have responsibility for bondholders, equity holders, the financial institutions that back our line of credit, bondholders, research analysts, rating agencies, right? It's basically the whole financial community. And the reason for doing that is there's no he said, she said when it comes to what went wrong. We know whose butt to kick if something is communicated wrong to the financial community. That's mine, right? So we build a very accountable organization, and through that accountability, that has really been what has driven our success. So having a flat organization, great. Broadening your role and responsibility across that organization, also great.
Hey, so in looking at this map of the mega regional creation, I can't help but notice that Richmond and Virginia overall is kind of left out here. We do have one of the largest ports in Norfolk right here, and I was wondering if, from your experience, you could provide some perspective on, what it takes to bring Virginia into one of these regions, or creating the structure that's going to make us, more competitive here.
Yeah, so it's not to say that if you're not in a mega region that you're not important to CSX or generally to the country. The mega regions that we posted up on our map are the ones where we have the highest concentration of population. So these are, the New Yorks, right? The Chicagos, the Bostons, the Philadelphias, the Washingtons, the Baltimores. Richmond is a good-sized city, but collectively with all the surrounding counties and everything, its metropolitan area size is just around 1 million people. Norfolk, nice-sized city again, but not as big as Richmond. It's an important port facility, which makes it very important to CSX, but not necessarily a mega region. A mega region is going to have millions and millions and millions of people in that region, and the areas that were not highlighted in the map are full of medium-sized cities, but not the mega region cities. Other questions?